She is a national treasure, an American icon.
This is the most complex beast ever made by mankind, and it took a lot of people and a lot of smarts to make this thing happen.
This thing is the Space Shuttle Atlantis. Majestic and massive, she is the centerpiece of a new museum at Kennedy Space Center.
I don't know how you can compare it to anything else.
And seeing it so intact and so beautiful, it's very emotional.
And inspirational. That's what separates Atlantis from every other attraction in Central Florida.
And I believe that even though Atlantis' journey is complete, her mission continues.
We wanted to make sure when we displayed Atlantis here in this beautiful building, it would inspire the next generation.
This is a Local 6 special event. We're going to take you on a journey through Atlantis. This is Atlantis, an incredible machine, a testimony to our nation's desire and determination to explore the heavens. Hello, I'm Eric Von Anken.
And I'm Kalorama. America's Reaching for the Stars has been centered here in Central Florida for generations. Space Shuttle Atlantis belongs here. Atlantis arrived at Kennedy Space Center in April 1985 and launched less than 6 months later. Her maiden voyage on October 3, 1985 was for the Defense Department.
And liftoff of Atlantis. A new orbiter joins the shuttle fleet and it has cleared the tower.
Atlantis' second trip into space launched at night and just 50 days after her first mission, the shortest turnaround in shuttle history. In 1989, Atlantis was the shuttle NASA chose to deploy planetary probes, first Magellan to Venus, then Galileo to Jupiter.
And flight crew, this is OTC. Close and lock your risers.
Beginning in 1995, Atlantis made 7 straight flights to the Russian space station Mir.
And liftoff of the Space Shuttle Atlantis on a mission that will herald a new day of international cooperation in space.
The partnership marked a number of firsts in human spaceflight, including the first U.S.-Russian spacewalk and first changeout of crew members.
After 20 years, our spacecraft are docked in orbit again.
And when linked, Atlantis and Mir formed the largest spacecraft in orbit at the time.
A new era of space exploration has begun.
Atlantis also delivered vital components for construction of the International Space Station, highlighted by the delivery of the Destiny module in 2001.
And liftoff of Space Shuttle.
In May 2009, Atlantis flew a 7-member crew to the Hubble Space Telescope. During 5 spacewalks, astronauts installed new cameras, batteries, and a gyroscope that NASA says will extend the life of Hubble until at least 2020. A total of 156 people flew aboard Atlantis over the course of her 33 missions. She orbited the Earth 4,848 times, logging nearly 126 million miles. Atlantis was the final shuttle to fly. She touched down at Kennedy Space Center for the final time on July 21st, 2011.
The space shuttle pulls into port for the last time. Its voyage at an end.
Her final flight marked the beginning of her new mission here at the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex.
Mission complete, Houston. After serving the world for over 30 years, the space shuttle's earned its place in history and it's come to a final stop.
Taking us on our journey through Atlantis is a man who flew aboard her, who walked in space while attached to her, astronaut Thomas Jones. And there are so many people in Central Florida who feel ownership of Atlantis. What do you feel, Tom, as you look at her and see her available for everybody else to see?
Well, for me, it's a homecoming. I'm face to face with a spaceship that kept me alive, took me to the space station, supported my spacewalks, and now I get to share Atlantis with the people coming to the visitor complex. They'll get as close as I got when I was on my spacewalks. And there's an emotional attachment for astronauts with their space shuttles, and I think you're going to find that same bond forming between visitors and Atlantis here.
Eric, I'm here with Tim Macy. He's the man behind the design, the development, and the construction of this Atlantis exhibit. So, Tim, what makes Atlantis here stand apart from all the other attractions in Central Florida?
Well, first and foremost, it's the real thing. You can't get any more real than this. This is Atlantis. She's flown 126 million miles on 33 missions. It doesn't get any more real than that, and nobody else in Central Florida, or frankly anywhere else, can match that.
If any of my spotters see any problems with the transporter, just tell us on the radio.
Getting Atlantis from the vehicle assembly building, where thousands of people worked on her for over 26 years, to the visitor center was a slow, emotional journey.
Don't cry because it's over. Smile because it happened.
The famous line from Dr. Seuss set the tone for the long day. Atlantis moved out of the VAB at dawn aboard a 76-wheel vehicle designed specifically to move a shuttle from one building to another. Some of the men and women who dedicated their lives to human spaceflight held a banner and waved flags in tribute, then marched behind Atlantis as she began her trip. 9.8 miles. Maximum speed, 2 miles an hour. Atlantis stopped a few times along the way so people could get close to her, take a final picture, create that lasting memory.
Just to stand under the wing when it came by, I can't tell you what that felt like. It was just incredible. Just incredible. It's probably one of the best days of my life right here.
This is incredible. I really am speechless, although I'm talking a lot, but I really am speechless.
A marching band joined Atlantis during her trip, and more people lined the streets to enjoy this once-in-a-lifetime parade. There were more flags, more banners. These kids held signs. We love you, Atlantis.
Flag! Everybody wave it to the shuttle!
After spending all day on the road, Atlantis turned into the visitor center. Everyone who walked with her joined with those who waited for her to arrive to celebrate with fireworks. Finally, Atlantis moved into her home.
And we rolled her in, and what was a giant building at the time, it felt so big, got very, very small in the course of about 5 minutes.
Big or small, construction workers needed Atlantis inside before they could finish the building.
This giant piece of machinery, this big old girl rolled right into where she was supposed to. Everything worked perfectly. I have never been involved in a one-day event that was as spectacular as this one was.
We got our first look at a shuttle lifting off into space in April 1981. Two legends were on board, Commander John Young and pilot Bob Crippen. But the idea of a reusable spacecraft like Atlantis was born in the 60s, before we'd even put a man on the moon.
Man on the moon.
The space shuttle was meant to follow the Apollo program. So in 1969, while most of NASA was focused on going to the moon,
The Eagle has landed.
there were those already working on what was to come. 10 years later, Columbia arrived at Kennedy Space Center on top of a 747, a sight never seen before. Because of a series of setbacks, NASA was not ready to launch her for 2 more years. The idea was to get Columbia off the ground with an expendable liquid hydrogen, liquid oxygen tank, and reusable solid rocket boosters. And she would return thanks to silica tiles, designed to protect the shuttle from the extreme heat of re-entry.
Astronaut John Young has put on his space helmet.
On launch day, Young, who in 1972 walked on the moon while serving as commander of Apollo 16, understood the risks ahead. This was the first time NASA was putting astronauts into space in a vehicle that had not flown unmanned first.
T-minus 10, 9, 8.
But on April 12, 1981, everything worked perfectly.
We have main engine start. Space shuttle, and the shuttle has cleared the tower.
Coming up on our journey through Atlantis, what's the meaning of this, and this, and that?
It's got a real specific design to it in terms of white and the black and the orange.
And what does seeing Atlantis like this mean to the astronauts who flew aboard her?
The thoughts, you know, you could, again, you close your eyes and you're right back in space again, and it's quite emotional.
But first, Calla begins her interactive journey through Atlantis, trying out one of the many simulators.
This simulator is one of the coolest. You get to do a spacewalk and see what it feels like to work and try to complete a mission as an astronaut in your gear. Here's how it starts. You basically center yourself up with the screen, and they'll take a picture of your face and put you in a moon suit. All right, you got to smile for your picture now. There we go. Here I am locked in the suit, ready to start my mission as an astronaut. We're going to work with the Hubble telescope solar panel. Your hands feel like they're in the gloves of a spacesuit. Here we are, we're going out the door, passing right by the Hubble telescope, going to the solar panel. That's where our mission is. We've got to grab on and stabilize this Hubble panel. Here we are. It's not as easy as it looks to grab on here. You could feel just how temperamental it is to use your gloves, and really how hard it is. You don't have the same feeling that you do on Earth. I guess this is what space is like for the astronauts. This is how hard their spacewalks were. Let's try to grab on. We're being timed just as the astronauts are on their spacewalks. We've got a limited amount of time to finish this here. We've got to get this solar panel stabilized and get back to our orbiter. And I think now we bring it down, and it says release with both arms. And there it goes. We've done that in 30 seconds. Great job, mission completed. I could be an astronaut, and so could you. When you come to see Atlantis, there's no missing this full-scale replica Space Shuttle stack, 184 feet tall. The assembly is positioned at the entrance to Atlantis. The sheer size of the external tank and two solid rocket boosters gives you a sense of the incredible power needed to thrust a shuttle into orbit. Your first steps in this $100 million facility aren't meant to impress you. That comes later. But what you will see in the queue is meaningful. We have dreamed big, as shuttle engineer Tom Milner says. Fellow engineer Michael Mitchell urges us all to keep dreaming, saying the shuttle program provides a glimpse of the greatness that lies ahead.
People are very tied into this program. Their dedication, their blood, their sweat, their knowledge.
Their love for Atlantis. But the queue is more than just a walkway with inspiring words. The floor, the walls, the colors, the design, all represent the burn of the liftoff and the heat of re-entry.
You'll see a lot of gray and black tiles on the side in an offsetting pattern. That's representative of the tiles on the bottom of the orbiter.
Those tiles made the shuttle program possible. The greatest engineering accomplishment, says Joan Haas, a budget analyst. And as you near the top of the queue, you're left with Jen Shear's impression. The shuttle technician calls Atlantis a beautiful machine and a work of art.
Anyone know why you're here? For this.
The pre-show brings us back to the late 60s, when the shuttle was conceived.
Good morning. We're going to create America's next spacecraft. It's going to launch like a rocket and land like an airplane, and it's going to be reusable. You know the rocket? It's not a rocket. It's a shuttle.
The pre-show brings you to the brink of Atlantis, and the payoff is priceless. But we're not going to show you. We could never do it justice on television. You have to see and feel it for yourselves.
The emotion just hit me. It was being there all over again and reflecting
on my personal experiences in space.
Mission specialist Bob Springer flew aboard Atlantis in November 1990, and he's experienced the reveal that Calla just talked about.
And I think when the public sees that, they're going to have the same type of feelings, whether they worked on the program or were just watching launches.
Roll angle now is
Springer took part in a Defense Department mission carrying a classified payload.
Reaching for runway.
He spent 5 days aboard Atlantis before touching down at Kennedy Space Center.
Landing gear confirmed down and
This was Atlantis's first landing at KSC in her history.
Touchdown. We have main gear on deck.
You know, I occasionally have a youngster that'll say, were you worried that things wouldn't work right? I'm like, you know, if you really had that kind of concern, you wouldn't be here. You'd never strap into that seat if you felt that way. So 100% confidence in the vehicle, the people who put it together, and your crew's ability to complete the mission, because you are the final phase of that operation. I think people are going to be really impressed to see it. You know, seeing it from the distance and realizing not only the magnitude, the size of the vehicle, you know, 2.5 million parts that are all come together to take a payload and our crew into space. I think that people are just going to be absolutely astounded at what they're going to see.
Next on our journey through Atlantis, the people who cared for Atlantis all those years, their labor of love.
How did I get so lucky and so blessed to be a part of America's space program?
My boss came in one day and said, "So John, how's the spaceship today?" I thought, wow, that is really cool. I'm getting to work on a spaceship.
You know, Calla, seeing Atlantis up there from down here makes me think of all the launches and all the landings I've covered, and how I always look forward to talking with the people who maintain the shuttle, the folks who kept her going, the men and women who readied her for liftoff and cared for her when she touched back down. And I could tell they truly loved their work. They smiled at each success, and of course that means they felt the pain when there was tragedy.
Eric, good point. There's such a sense of incredible pride here because working with the shuttle was never just a job. Terry White is a shuttle lifer. He worked every launch and landing, all 135 of them.
I started out as a mechanic, then they made me a supervisor. They realized my supervision skills were greater than my mechanical skills.
John Coward came to NASA in 1987 as a project engineer for Atlantis.
And I'll never forget that first day, driving up State Road 3, you see the VAB, you're gonna go work on a space shuttle.
Charlie Blackwell Thompson's dream came true when Kennedy Space Center hired her right out of college.
I cannot imagine anything more gratifying and more fulfilling than being a part of this program.
And when Atlantis launched for the final time, there's Charlie in the firing room as the assistant NASA test director. Her job? Plan and execute the countdown.
And you get down to 25, 20, 15, 10, 5, booster ignition and liftoff. That is it's a feeling that's hard to describe.
John's job? Make sure Atlantis was ready for launch.
And when you're out there the night before and all the lights are on her and it's you and maybe 3 or 4 other people all alone out there, that is an amazing thing.
Maybe more amazing is the genius behind the thermal protection system, the tiles that protected the shuttles from the extreme heat at liftoff and re-entry. Terry was part of the team that made them work.
Well, there was a lot of worry in a lot of people's minds about would the vehicle perform correctly, would the thermal protection system, which I was a big part of, would it work the way it was designed? And after the end of the first flight, we realized it did.
Terry, John, and Charlie are among the tens of thousands of people who dedicated their lives to the shuttle program. They celebrated every success together, and they shared every pain together.
Everybody, whether you involved with a system that was somewhat accountable for either one of those accidents, you felt personally responsible. Especially after Columbia, you start thinking, wow, I am not going to let that happen again.
And it did not happen again.
Pick up the clock at 9.
Some even sacrificed paychecks to keep the shuttles flying.
If I tell you I need you to come in tomorrow, but you're not going to get paid because of the budget issues, will you come in here? And they said yes.
And when the shuttle program was nearing the end, when they realized the future of space did not include them, when the layoffs began, Many stayed true to the mission.
Their dedication was whatever it takes. Once all of this is done and they tell me they no longer need my services, then I'll go look for some other type of employment.
There's a sense of love and passion that goes into that, and it is very much like a relationship with your family. No, I cannot imagine what my life would be like without it.
Oh man, you're going to get me in trouble if I say I love this more than my wife. So. Yeah. A marriage is a lot of give and take, and learning to work with each other and live with each other. And it's really actually quite similar to working with a space shuttle orbiter like Atlantis. And everybody knows that their piece is vital to the success of the mission.
We have ignition.
John and Charlie are working on what's next at NASA. The next vehicle, the next trip, the moon, an asteroid, maybe a mission to Mars. As for Terry, after all those years.
I didn't retire. I was laid off the day after Atlantis landed. It was emotional. Actually getting it into the hangar the last time and walking through those doors knowing that wouldn't be going back in there to do it again was really emotional.
Thank you, Columbia, Challenger, Discovery, Endeavor, and our ship Atlantis. God bless the United States of America.
I was over at the Cape for Atlantis' final flight. I was there watching her final landing, and before she took her final rest right here, I got the chance of a lifetime. I climbed inside Atlantis.
Hey, welcome aboard.
This is surreal, climbing into a space shuttle, Atlantis, the last one to leave the Kennedy Space Center, the last one to ever fly in space.
Wow, this is tight. A little small.
It's hard to believe astronauts lived here for weeks at a time.
Wow, we're inside the space shuttle.
And worked here, fixing awe-inspiring telescopes, deploying life-changing satellites, and inventing life-saving technology.
I got to tell you, it's an overwhelming feeling sitting here. It really is unbelievable trying to take all of this in, knowing how huge a part of history this ship is, knowing what it's done for America and how far it's gone into space.
We even got to add to history on the way out of Atlantis. And making space history was only made possible.
This is Margaret Thatcher.
By the men and women here at KSC who upgraded and upkept the space shuttles over the life of the 30-year program.
These names mean to me the people that have sweat, blood, given their heart for this program.
Of course, we're all depressed that this is ending. The biggest thing is we have nothing to replace this workhorse.
Mike Williams gave 34 years of his life to the shuttles, specifically to the protective tiles. What's next for him? Hopefully more tiling on more spacecrafts. Hopefully.
I'm over 50. Who knows?
And if not, Mike and the other guys tell me it's been a great run working so close to a great piece of American engineering. And NASA knows letting us get this close helps us realize what a great loss losing the shuttles will be.
What an honor that was, Tom. What a privilege to be able to do that. My impression was that everything felt tight and small, climbing through the hatch and then up to the flight deck. I mean, you really kind of had to suck it in to get up there.
When you go from the simulators in Houston to the real space shuttles here, you do get impressed by how cramped it is. And the only solution for that is to go to space and enjoy the extra space that gets delivered by being in free fall or weightlessness. And you can use the upper half of the room, you can eat lunch on the ceiling, you sleep on the walls, and you don't get claustrophobic. And if you do have to escape from one of your friends inside for a little bit, just go gaze out the window and the horizon's 1,000 miles out.
Does that work?
It does. Instant solution to claustrophobia. And you know, those spaces inside seem cramped here on the ground, but really you're catapulted into the universe. So it feels very roomy mentally.
I only had a few minutes up there. I know you had days. But still, I feel a small sort of sense of attachment to her.
Yeah, all the ships that I flew on, I'm very grateful to. Atlantis was my last ship. Kept me alive, took me to the space station, supported my spacewalks. And there's this bond between you and the ship. It's an inanimate object, but it almost is alive in the way it can take you to this exotic environment and then bring you safely back home. So there's that emotional bond that'll never be broken for me.
Coming up on our journey through Atlantis, How did they do that?
That really is a great question because we struggled with it.
How did they raise and turn Atlantis? All 155,000 pounds of her, so we could appreciate all of her.
A lot went into it. A lot of people didn't think it was going to work.
Getting Atlantis inside this 90,000 square foot building was nothing compared to raising her 30 feet in the air and rotating her at a 43.21 degree angle. Let me say that again, a 4321 degree angle. You can tell no detail was overlooked here. And Atlantis is displayed as if she were orbiting the Earth.
We wanted to display Atlantis in flight because that's where it's natural. The original idea we kicked around was let's raise it up and hang it from the building. Well, she's 155,000 pounds and over 135 feet long. That would have been very difficult.
This time-lapse video shows how the engineers figured out a way to raise Atlantis off the floor and tilt her to the audience. First, they built a machine to lift the shuttle. Then crews wrapped her in shrink wrap to protect her.
This is a priceless piece of machinery that you want to make sure nothing happens to her. It's incumbent upon us as a design team and a production team and a delivery team to make sure that's done right. We have a lot of pride in the fact that she's here and that we are responsible for making sure that she stays in the pristine condition that she's in.
Finally, after raising her 30 feet into the air, the engineers tilted Atlantis.
It was very an exacting science.
A series of tests proved she would hold in position when fastened at the same 3 points that NASA used to attach the shuttle to that 747.
The way she's displayed here, you are so close. That's the part that makes it so unique. She's so close and you can you get intimate with it in terms of, you can see really a lot of detail on it. Well, there are a lot of design elements that went into that to make sure that we could look into the payload bay, that we could see the wings, that we could get a kind of 360 view of it. And I think we've captured it.
As we look at Atlantis suspended in orbit and remember her place in history, it's easy to understand why the shuttle is the most complicated and sophisticated machine ever built, Tom.
2.5 million pieces put together with no margin for error. To be precise, Atlantis here is 122.17 feet long, stands 56.58 feet high, and has a wingspan of 78.06 feet. She weighs 151,315 pounds. That's just short of 80 tons.
Wow.
Coming up on our journey through Atlantis.
How much of this is authentic, Tom? How much of this is like it was when you were on board?
I would say by mass, there's 99% of the real space shuttle right here.
Tom gives us a personal tour of the shuttle. But first, Kala continues her interactive journey through Atlantis.
This is a really cool simulator. Makes you feel like you're an astronaut looking out the windows of Atlantis and just how hard it is to move the Canadarm. This robotic arm has worked with the Hubble Space Telescope. It has worked with payload, helping it move in and out of space, and it certainly helps the astronauts when they're in space move things outside of the spaceship. It has cameras on the end so you can see where you're going. What you have here are windows that show you different angles outside Atlantis, just like the ones above you that show the Earth, because the astronauts are flying upside down. Pretty cool. You get to move the arm from 3 different parts, from the shoulder of the arm, the elbow of the arm, and the wrist of the arm. You just press this button to start, and then you've got to keep an eye on all the monitors here so that you don't crash into anything in space. We have 4 minutes to do our mission. Let's see what we could do. All right, this joystick helps you move the Canadarm basically away from the orbiter. You can press the buttons to move the robotic arm from different angles. You can move it from the shoulder, from the elbow, and the wrist of the arm. It's really hard to operate and very interesting, and it's sometimes disorienting, so you know how hard it is for astronauts to do and just how skilled they are. What a beautiful shot. You can see inside the payload doors, and then just in the distance, the Earth. This is really cool. I am moving the Canadarm from different angles to get the items out of the payload area and out into space. It's pretty cool. You do have a camera at the end of the Canadarm so you can see where you're going. What's tough is not hitting the spaceship. And this whole time you're upside down because, as you see, the Earth is above you. These are supposed to be just like an astronaut situation, using the Canadarm, looking out the windows of the orbiter to get their mission done.
This is it, Tom. It's right here for everybody to see.
This is just the view that I had of Atlantis from space, revealed in all its glory, and I'm so glad that we can now share that with millions of people.
And it's so close. I mean, you could almost touch it. You could touch the bell, the engine bell.
Well, that's the whole effect here. I think people want to get up close and personal with this amazing chapter in America's space exploration history.
Give me a little from back to front here. Kind of walk me through, the main parts.
You can't believe the amount of violence that those engines generate. 500,000 pounds of thrust for each one. Gives you the power to get off the launch pad and 8.5 minutes later be going 5 miles a second orbital velocity. So they only get used at the beginning of the mission and they never speak the rest of the flight, but they're essential to the mission. Smaller engine bells there are the maneuvering engines that you use to change your orbit for a docking with the space station and to slow you down just enough to come back home. So those are the guts of getting you to and from space. And then the rest of the spaceship is what you do when you get to space.
The giant tail. You realize how big it is?
Yeah, it's 56.7 feet tall from the ground up to the tip of the tail. And it's got to be a hypersonic flying machine to come back from Mach 25 all the way to landing speed, a couple hundred miles an hour. So that tail has to function throughout a wide range of flight environments. The black tiles are to protect the leading edge of the rudder and the speed brakes from the high temperatures during re-entry. The white blankets for lower temperature environments.
I'm noticing there are black marks all over. It looks like it's a little bruised.
Right, there's some ground handling, scuffing that goes on, but a lot of that scorching is from those re-entry temperatures.
This is authentic.
3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Some of the yellow tan tones you see at the back end are from that booster exhaust that you see lifting the ship off the pad. All of that turbulent exhaust makes its way up and stains those blankets in the back end.
And then as we work our way forward here, the payload bay doors are open. You can see right in.
Yeah, the payload bay is something that I only saw from the pressurized cabin and out the back windows or when I was on a spacewalk.
You can see this is a workspace in here. This was the workhorse of the shuttle.
That 60-foot long, 15-foot wide payload bay, we carried the brains of the space station, the Destiny laboratory, up to space. And look at the silvery radiators that line the cargo bay. They were essential to keep the ship cool. Electronics, the heat from your human bodies up in the crew cabin, dumping that heat outside. You got to have those open to stay alive.
You can't open these doors on Earth, usually.
You have to have a special lifting fixture to support them because they're only strong enough to hold up in free fall, not in Earth's one gravity. The yellow handrails along the edge of the radiators here are where I translated up and down the cargo bay. It's sort of counterintuitive, but you do your translation or moving around on your fingertips along those handrails with your body just floating out into space. So only your fingertips touch those rails, and it's like a ballet dance down the sides of the cargo bay.
The Canadarm is extended to where you could almost reach up and touch that.
Right, and that was instrumental in, of course, the construction of the space station and in launching the satellites that we had on a lot of missions. And it's 50 feet long and has all of the natural joints of your arm, so it can articulate and lift cargo bay components out for the space station or grapple satellites. Very versatile. The wrist was the best part, up and down, left and right, and rolling left and right.
And you were at the end of that.
The best ride that you could ever have is to be on the end of that cherry picker of an arm as you get moved to your next job site on the space station, and talk about the ride of your life.
Swinging you around in space.
You're looking down, just hanging on by a little tether to the end of the arm. For about 5 minutes, you get the freedom to not have to work, but just to enjoy the view and soak up that amazing view of our planet.
And how about up front there? That's the crew module.
crew module was, you know, my home in space for 13 days. And the crew cabins got the space for the 5, 6, 7 astronauts living up there. There's a flight deck right there for the test pilots sitting in the front seats, the commander and pilot, fly it to and from orbit, maneuver in space. And then downstairs, the middeck, just below, is another sort of minivan-sized space that gives you your living quarters, the kitchen, the bathroom, all the storage lockers full of food and clothing and so forth. And so you ate and you lived and you kept clean and you exercised and you flew the spaceship from there. So you became intimately familiar with every square inch of that place. And it's a lot like a camping trip. You don't have a lot of room inside your tent and you're in the great outdoors and you make some compromises in terms of hygiene and food. It's rather confined, but all you have to do is look out the window and you've got a 1,000-mile vista.
Were you ever claustrophobic up there?
I never felt confined inside that little cabin up there because you've got those 10 windows on the flight deck and there's a side hatch window and they enable you to just look outside and just, you can transport your mind out there into the universe, into the star field on the night side of Earth. At the daytime, you can imagine just zooming down and flying to the Straits of Gibraltar or the city of Rome or the Grand Canyon. So that's silvery ring there is the connection between you and the space station. And Atlantis made 12 dockings at the International Space Station, and in your shirt sleeves you could just float up through that tunnel into somebody's home in space.
Were you did you feel like you were on top of each other?
No. After a year or more of training, you can almost read each other's minds. And so if somebody is in a bad mood, for example, or having a bad moment, you can just give them some space, and you just recognize that. And to share that closeness was, I think, a far more prominent emotion that we had. We were doing this together. We can enjoy the results of that together.
Coming up on our journey through Atlantis, Tom and I continue our conversation.
I bet one of the questions you get asked most is, how do you use this? How do you go to the bathroom in space?
And Calla and Tim talk telescopes.
I think people are going to be really surprised when they come out to see really how big this Hubble really is.
Atlantis made the final shuttle voyage to the Hubble telescope. Because of the work done during those 12 days in May 2009, we can expect to receive spectacular pictures from deep space for the next several years. All right, Tim Macy, so why is Hubble such an important part of this Atlantis exhibit?
Well, Hubble absolutely is an important part of the exhibit because Atlantis was the last one to touch her. And she went up, her crew went up, caught it, serviced her, sent her back into space, and we get the images that we have today. Also, it wasn't just Atlantis, it was the whole shuttle program. 4 of the 5 shuttles actually came in contact as we deployed her and then went back several times to make sure she worked.
What's so interesting for people to see is that this is actually an exact replica of what's in space right now, the size and the shape.
Exactly. It looks, I think people are going to be really surprised when they come out to see really how big this Hubble really is. It barely fit in the payload bay doors, and it's about the size of a small bus. And when they come out and see how it's bright and shiny, but that's the way it has to be. It's got a lot of antennas on it, it's got a lot of communications equipment, and it brings back those great images that we've come to expect.
So Tom, I bet one of the questions you get asked most is, how do you use this? How do you go to the bathroom in space?
Can't work in space without having a bathroom to enable you to work in space. So here on the ground, gravity makes everything go where it's supposed to go in the bathroom. In free fall, you need a substitute, and the engineers have used moving air for that. So you come into the bathroom, you flip on a switch, turns on a vacuum motor. For liquid waste, for the urine, you've got a funnel on the end to hold up next to your body, sucks the urine down into a storage tank. For the solid waste, same technique. You can sort of float on the lip of the seat, but you really need some clamps to hold your thighs down.
So you strap in.
You strap in, and then the same moving air blows the solid waste from your body down into the containment tank underneath. And in fact, we recycle the liquid urine into breathing oxygen for the crew and for drinking water. So you want to keep that separate from the waste stream. Solid waste gets disposed of with the cargo or trash ships that leave the space station about every quarter.
Have you tried this water?
I have not had a chance to, but my colleagues assure me that it's just, pure as a mountain stream.
I bet a lot of people think it's fairly simple. It's just like on Earth, but it's not. In fact, you have instructions and you have training on how to do this.
In space you'd have a small card with a checklist. These are the steps for the visitors here. But first of all, you've got to learn how to position yourself on the commode. so that the waste goes where it's supposed to go. And you do that on the ground with a camera feedback loop. You get to see how you're sitting on the seat through a camera that's pointing up from underneath.
There's a target like this.
Well, not literally, but you get to see your bottom and position it accurately on the seat. Once you get that muscle feel, then you can remember that without using a visual aid.
So this is like a training toilet, Tom.
Yeah.
There's actually a camera in here.
Yeah, when you come to the visitor center, you get to actually try out the training technique.
And watch yourself.
Looking at your position overhead, and then you would go through the rest of the steps. And in Houston, there is an actual working simulator of the toilet that you actually get to use.
What is the trickiest part about it? Making sure that the waste all stays in one place.
Well, you want to keep the waste going where it's supposed to go. And the trickiest part really is doing these steps in the proper sequence so you don't create chaos in the bathroom, and then you can clean up and get back to work quickly and efficiently.
How about taking a shower? You can't really do that up there.
We use a sponge bath technique. We don't want to get the mess of a shower with its droplets floating everywhere. So you squirt hot water onto a washcloth, you add some rinseless soap that we use in nursing homes, and then you give yourself a sponge bath, towel off with a nice clean dry towel, and you're ready to go for the next day.
Not like taking a shower at home, though.
It's not very satisfying. It's functionally good, and you feel clean afterwards, but when I arrived back on Earth, first thing I did, long hot shower.
Well, interesting. This is something I think we've always wanted to know.
All right, now we get to give ourselves a try at landing the Atlantis. This simulator is very similar to what the astronauts actually train on, so you really do get a first-hand look of what the astronauts go through when they're trying to land the orbiter. We're in this thing that's similar to a cockpit of the orbiter, and we're going to land it just like the astronauts do, or at least we're going to try. It's not as easy as it looks here. We're right by the Space Coast. You can see the landing strip. You have your astronaut and trainer, Michael Massimino, telling you that you need to glide the shuttle to safety. Well, let's try. It shows you the landing strip. And apparently in the skyline, you see lots of things that the astronauts would see. So you have the beach to your right. You have the vehicle assembly building here. It's a big landmark that you want to look out for as you pull in safely to your landing strip. It's really not as easy as it looks to keep this big orbiter steady. This joystick brings the orbiter up. You want to keep it lined up with that diamond so that you hit the runway safe and sound. Gotta pull up. We're doing pretty well here. This is not easy. Oh, see, you gotta pull up quickly. Looks like we could make a clean landing. Right over the trees. Here we go. I think I'm successful. I did it. We landed safely and the parachute comes out. There you go. That is a feeling of pride. Great job, mission completed.
Next up on our journey through Atlantis, her impact on the future of space.
And I believe that even though Atlantis' journey is complete, her mission continues. And it is for all the folks that come in here and see her, I believe that they too will be struck with that moment of awe and wonder.
We have this need, this urge to explore and find what's out there beyond the known and going into the unknown.
For 30 years, people from around the world flocked to Central Florida to watch Atlantis and the other shuttles lift off. And most of those people eventually made their way here to the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex.
And now that the shuttle program is over, the hope is that this Atlantis exhibit will continue to bring people to the Space Coast.
People lining the streets, looking upward from the beaches, the launch of Shuttle Atlantis. This is what was.
The most amazing machine that's flown in space, and in 40 years since its design to its last flight, no other nation on Earth has equaled it.
All of a sudden, you've taken this hunk of metal and steel and put it all together, and you've created a living entity out of it.
And this is what is Atlantis in retirement.
This is a national treasure, and even more so a regional treasure for the people here in Central Florida.
And the hope is Atlantis will keep people coming to the Space Coast, even at rest.
Over the 30 or 35 years of the program, up to 3 generations of families have actually worked on this. They have a real desire to make sure that this is presented in a way that's comfortable and proper and accessible and realistic and correct. So we continue to inspire the next generation of kids and parents that want to explore space.
For many people, it's hard to see the future of space exploration. So my suggestion is when you come here, spend some time in the rocket garden. From the Redstone and Atlas and Titan rockets to the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo capsules. The evolution of space travel is right there. The shuttle program is not the end.
Now, most people don't know a time when we did not have astronauts going to space.
We have this need to explore, and what we've done in the shuttle was a pathfinder for that exploration. I just think it's part of man's destiny.
This is one generation of spacecraft. Now we're moving on to another. So I think somebody coming face to face with this, a young person would say, hey, this is great, but I want to do something even greater.
Yes, I can imagine the day when I'm standing out here and I watch the rocket lift off that's going to carry humans to Mars. You bring young kids out here, the ones 10, 11 years old. Those kids especially, I am envious of, because they are the perfect age right now. If we go to Mars in the 2030s, they're the ones who are going to be on that mission. They could be the commander of that mission.
When you have folks that love what they do, folks that can dream it and make it happen, you can do incredible things.
What's next is still to come. What's for sure is that if you come to see Atlantis, it will never be the same experience twice. I'm Kalorama.
And I'm Eric Von Anken. Thanks for joining us for Journey Through Atlantis.